Now is the time for hearts to be open. No better time, this moment of grace. This is the day we can't wait for tomorrow or someday. Now is the time. Now is the time for planting and tending seeds born of hope, commitment and faith. Cherish this day and the power in knowing why we say, now is the time. Love is the lesson and the legacy we know. Now is the season for the seeds of love to grow. And so, now is the time for vision and courage, witness to love, to spirit and truth. No better way than the promise of this one, so we say, now is the time. Now is the time for hearts to be open. No better time, this moment of grace. This is the day we can't wait for tomorrow or someday. Now is the time. Now is the time.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton, the home edition. My name is Madeline Verkhosek, and along with several members of the 8th Principal Working Group, I am this morning's service leader. The working group members involved in today's service are Richard Douglas Chin, Beverly Horton, Tim Versteeg, Janice Webster, and our honorary member, Al Sharp. I also want to thank today's service team, which includes our religious educator, Tim Versteeg, and our music ministers, Rachel Derry, the Music Committee Quartet, and the Zoom Ensemble. Bruce McPherson and Tim Versteeg are our tech team this morning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, you are welcome in this faith community. Our congregational mission includes our commitment to nurture one another, serve the community, and inspire action to heal the world.
This morning, we have 2 acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We acknowledge that again and again, we settlers have broken that promise to care for and to share this land. Ask you to join in acknowledging original peoples of this land, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. I ask that we also acknowledge that settler culture was founded upon exclusion and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose land we are now located. This acknowledgement is to demonstrate commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We acknowledge our need to address racism that has led and continues to lead to the violent deaths of Black people and Indigenous peoples. And we acknowledge that anti-Black racism and settler colonialism create and perpetuate inequalities, injustices, poverty, and exclusion in Canadian society. May we commit ourselves to becoming an anti-racist faith community dedicated to equity and racial justice.
Good morning, beloveds. My name is Jamie Boyce, and I have the great privilege of serving this congregation as the interim minister. Welcome to this day of reflection and celebration. This congregation, this community has been on a journey of learning, listening, reflecting, and growing in relationship and understanding to what it means to be a committed anti-racist, anti-oppression community. There is so much to celebrate as we rejoice the leadership of the 8th Principal Work Group, Team Leader Beverly Horton, Richard Douglas Chin, Bill Johnston, Jennifer Kay, Madeline Verkhosek, Tim Versteeg, Janice Webster, and Kelly Wolf, and honorary supporter in today's service, Al Sharp. Now is the time for vision and courage. Join me as I light our chalice. We light this chalice as a symbol of our shared faith, our shared Unitarian Universalist faith. May the spirit of love guide our day, strengthen our hearts, and deepen our connection. Join me in our unison words. May this flame be our light of friendship
and love.
Welcome. I invite Mary Eve to our service to share a Canvas update with us this morning.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning. This is a challenging time for all of us, a time of uncertainty and of hope, a time of anxiety and cautious joy, a time of transition between pandemic life and what life will be like in the future. And to be honest with you, it's a challenging time to have a fundraising campaign for our church. We receive no funds from any other sources. So it's up to us individually and collectively to contribute the money needed for our operating budget that supports every aspect of our Hamilton church community. Bruce, if you don't mind showing the photo. We're now at the halfway mark of our 2-week annual Canvas Pledge campaign. To date, we've received about $96,000 as represented by the leaves on our sanctuary tree. Thank you for your financial support. As you can see, we've got a fair way to go to reach to the top of the tree, which represents our goal of $280,000 needed for our operating budget. Now, our church is more than our building. It's embodied by the people and what we bring to it, our faith and our doubts, our memories and our vision, our individuality and our collectivity, our beliefs and our values, and our love of one another and the world, even when it's difficult. Our church is important to so many of us, and I'd like to share some testimonials we've received. The first one is from Daphne Payne. The church has been my rock and still is during COVID-19. The next is from Pat Dickinson. More than ever during COVID, the church has been our connection with the community of people who are committed to social justice, fellowship, and spirituality. I don't think we've missed a single Zoom church service. They are our lifeline, our touchstone. We are so grateful for everything that the church community accomplishes, and we feel fortunate to be able to support this work through our pledge each year. And another testimonial from Renata Mante. I joined the Unitarian Church many years ago in 1985, after my oldest son, Tristan, came home from kindergarten one day and asked, "Mom, what's church?" I knew it was time to consider church and that a return to my childhood Lutheran church was not in the works. So when two friends whom I had met at the Hamilton Women's Center, Ginny Megan and Hilda Mack, introduced me to the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton, I felt right at home and looked no further. I've been a member since then and have been involved in different activities over the years. To me, it is always a place where I feel welcomed, where I have made friends, where I can refresh and gain new energy to face the world, where I can reflect and grow with the support and non-judgment of others who also believe in the humanist values that our church community. We've also received some anonymous testimonials on a new platform, a Padlet, that Reverend Jamie introduced last week. And I'd like to read a few of those as well. They're a bit shorter, except for one. The church has been a touchstone for my faith journey for the past 40 years. Within its community, I feel nurtured, challenged, and supported. Our church provides me with an opportunity to stretch myself, both mentally and emotionally. Watching children grow with acceptance and guidance has been a joy to me. I am grateful for this spiritual community, for its opportunities for connection, learning, serving, and for keeping Unitarian Universalism alive for those who would welcome what we have to offer. And one last testimonial. The First Unitarian Church of Hamilton has become my spiritual home and my spiritual family. From the first moment I stepped through its doors, I knew that I belonged here, a place where I could truly be myself and explore and express my spiritual beliefs and doubts. I was overjoyed to find others here who were on their own journey of discovery, and that this was a place where we could support one another. And over the past years, this church has extended its ministry beyond its walls to include social justice issues in our local community, our country, and the world. I am so grateful to this church and am happy to support it financially. So, what about you? What does this church mean to you? Why is it worth supporting? What would life be like if our church, its people, programs, activities, and all that we derive from it didn't exist? I encourage you to consider these questions and make a financial pledge of support if you are able. No amount is too small or too big. Canvas information is available on the church website. I'll be posting some information on the chat. You can just log in, go to the bottom of the page, and you'll find all kinds of Canvas information and an online pledging form. You just put in a few entries and click, you're done. You can also pledge by sending your details to the Canvas email address or to the church through postal mail, or you can even call me. While the trees outside are losing their leaves, let's fill our sanctuary tree all the way to the top, if we can. And let us consider being like the acronym TREES, TREES, which is this year's Canvas theme. Together, resilient, engaging, enduring, solid. Thank you very much.
Good morning. We're going to do hymn number 1014 from the Teal hymnal, originally called Standing on the Side of Love. This hymn was written by UU Minister of Music, Jason Shelton. When those with other abilities came to him and said they felt that the language was not inclusive, Jason listened, and he has decided to rename this song and change the lyrics just a bit to, instead of standing on the side of love, answering the call of love, which I think is what he's done by renaming and reworking the lyrics. So if you're following along in the hymnal, anytime you see standing on the side of love, it is changed to answering the call of love. The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Earlier this year, Amanda Gorman became the youngest inaugural poet in US history, and she recently released a book called Change Sings, with her words and pictures by Lauren Long, and that was the book that I thought would perfectly suit our service today. I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along. I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers. I'm a chant that rises and sings. There is hope where my change rings. Though some don't understand it, those windmills of mysteries, I sing with all the planet and its hills of histories. I hum with 100 hearts, each of us lifting a hand. I use my strength and my smarts, take a knee to make a stand. I'm bright as the light each day brings. There is love where my change sings. I show others tolerance, though it might take some courage. I don't make a taller fence, but fight to build a better bridge. I talk not only of distances, from where and how we came. I also walk out differences to show we are the same. I'm a movement that roars and springs. There's a wave where my change sings. Change sings where? There, inside me. Because I'm the change I want to see. As I grow, it grows like seeds. I am just what the world needs. I'm the voice where freedom rings. You're the love the bright heart brings. We are the waves starting to spring, for we are the change we sing. We're what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long. We all hear change strumming. Won't you sing along? That's our story for this morning.
For our contemplation and reflection for today, I'll ask you to gently set down anything you might have in your hands and take a deep breath and close your eyes if you feel comfortable and just be with ourselves in the silence. I'm going to read a poem by Norbesi Phillip, who is a Caribbean-Canadian poet. The poem is called Meditations on the Declension of Beauty. It's about being and language and Blackness in particular, but I think that Blackness here could also be indigeneity, homelessness, disability, many, many things. In whose language am I? Am I not? Am I? I am yours. Am I not? I am yours. Am I? I am. If not in yours, in whose? In whose language am I? If not in yours, beautiful.
Good morning. Welcome to First You, where you singular and you plural join together and making community. This morning we have three guests. We have Al Sharp, a longtime member of First Unitarian Church of Hamilton, a chorister amongst several other things. We have Madeline Verkhosek, who has been a member of our congregation for about 5 years. And I will say a little bit more about her later. Our new reverend, our interim minister, Reverend Jamie Boyce, will also be a co-host for the show today, and she will be a guest as well. But right now, I'd like to have a little chat with our music director and band leader, Rachel Derry.
Good
So
morning.
Rachel,
Hi, Rachel.
Good
COVID,
morning.
nasty. How's that affecting your music these days? I know, we used to have the house band and things were rocking. So, I'm glad that you've been able to switch to the virtual realm, but how's that affecting you as a musician?
Oh, well, it's just not the same, man. I mean, the whole thing about music is it's about sharing and receiving. You give, you get. It's the whole thing about the communication between people. So the virtual really interferes with that, I'll say. Although I have to give kudos to Miss Cindy Carey, who's been like a champion, and we're trying to do it virtually as much as we can, and that's lovely. And it's just, it's to have that connection with each other. But I can't wait until we can actually sing in the same room and feel each other's spirits in the same room. It's just nothing replaces that.
So true. And I'm so happy. We're so blessed to have you and Cindy making music in the virtual space. I'm really glad that you've recorded some things so that we can experience that during the show today. So I was watching, we're watching YouTube all the time. YouTube is where I live most of the time. And I encountered this video that's gone viral. And I want to share it with you today. It's recorded by one of our honorary members of the Eighth Principle Working Group, and that's Al Sharp. So Al has become a YouTube sensation. He's offering this recording for us today, talking about what we called his conversion experience as it comes to dismantling racism and other oppressions, his work for social justice and for the common good. So I am going to invite, who's our tech person? Invite Bruce, if you could play Al's video for us.
My first experience with the Eighth Principle came one Thursday evening in 2018, after a choir rehearsal, when Beverly Horton asked me to be a signatory on the preliminary Eighth Principle resolution for the CUC. I thanked Beverly for asking, but did not agree to sign. At that time, I thought that being truly accountable to our covenant to affirm and promote the 7 principles, particularly the first principle, already required us to dismantle racism and other forms of oppression within our congregations. I saw no need to add an 8th principle. So, what is my conversion story, as Beverly and I have been calling my shift from nay that evening in 2018 to being an enthusiastic proponent of adding the 8th principle to our covenant? I'll try to outline what happened to me and hope it might be helpful if there are some who remain doubtful or resistant to adding the 8th principle. I understand now that my response that evening to Beverly was because I lacked a deep understanding of the nature of racism and oppression. I realize now that what I thought I had learned and processed about racism from living in apartheid South Africa during 1974 and 75 was grossly inadequate to deal with its expression in Canada. As I think back to that evening in 2018, I can also see that my response demonstrated my fear that the UU principles that were central to my personal identity were being found wanting. It also betrayed my white privilege by implying that if these principles worked for me, they should also work for everyone, no matter what their race or other circumstances. And perhaps most sadly, my response was hurtful to a valued friend who was asking for support and did not get it from me. The story began when I first made contact with Unitarians in the fall of 1975 at the Unitarian Fellowship of Fredericton, New Brunswick. Mary and I had just returned to Canada after our South African experience, where I had my first university teaching position at the all-white University of Natal in Pietermaritzburg. The Unitarian Fellowship of Fredericton was the safe and supported community I needed in which to do much of the processing of this experience. It helped me in my search for spiritual meaning for over 30 years until we moved to Hamilton in 2008. The original 6 UU principles gave me a solid sense of grounding and provided guidance about who I was and how to interact with others. They became central to my sense of identity. In 1985, the principles and sources were updated to make them more relevant to our individual and collective lives. The wording was changed to be less patriarchal. A 7th principle was added, acknowledging the interdependent web and our place in it, and a source was added, recognizing the spiritual teachings of earth-centered religions. I was positive about these changes. I think it is fair to say these changes did not challenge my core identity, my sense of myself, my place in the world. While the shifts did reflect a different worldview, the updated principles did not specifically ask me to turn my attention to the privilege I had by virtue of being born a white cisgender male. Or if they did, I did not have a sense I needed to pay much attention to that ask while still remaining a solid Unitarian. The addition of the 8th principle is different. It does explicitly ask me to face up to the privileges I have, to the oppressions in the world around me, in our church, in Canada, and in the wider world, and to actively commit to dismantling racism and other oppressions. Not all at once, not beyond my capabilities as an individual, but committing myself and collectively us as a spiritual community to do this work, which is most importantly ministry. Accepting the 8th principle as an individual means that I need to look at the ways I am privileged, the tailwinds I have had by virtue of being born a white male, accidents of birth, and to change my sense of entitlement, to be prepared to let go of power and control in relationships and situations where I have been accustomed to exercising it, while implicitly assuming this contributed to making me a good person, a person who belonged, a person with some status. So what made me think that adding the 8th principle and letting go of some of this privilege would be a good idea? I think it is mainly that I have had many opportunities in the past 3 years to see and listen to people tell their stories of the harm that our Canadian version of racism and other oppressions has on them, people who are paying the price for my privilege. While the laws in Canada are different from those in 1975 South Africa, social attitudes and a whole range of interactions and systems continue to maintain oppression here. Harm that can be all too easy for those of us with privilege to ignore. Stories like Matthew Green's experience of being carded by the Hamilton police, Madeline's Sunday talk about racial implications in policing, healthcare, and medical research, moving accounts at the 2019 UUA General Assembly in Spokane by attendees and leaders of UU experiences that did not respect their BIPAC, transgender, disabled, or other identities, and where Robin DiAngelo, author of White Fragility, explained white privilege and fragility in terms I could understand. Many stories have emerged about the depth and breadth of harms to Indigenous people and how multifaceted effort is required to address them. Evidence of the harms of racism and other oppressions in the lives of people are all around us. We need to be willing and able to look. Different people will be at different places in their journey and will find different stories and information relevant. We do not all have to be at the same place in the journey to make a commitment to travel together. Social expectations are a big part of why the oppressive systems continue and what keeps them running. A supportive community where others are also willing to look at the harms caused by racism and other oppressions can help us, individually and collectively, interrupt this flow. If we commit to it, our church community can play a big role in helping us recognize and modify our patterns of entitlement, even when, and perhaps especially when, this process is uncomfortable. I believe that adding the 8th principle will give us the necessary focus to do this work and ministry. I think it can strengthen mutual trust and support as we individually and as a community deepen our understanding, expand our vision, and hold ourselves accountable to act to dismantle racism and other oppressions. And so, I encourage members to vote for adding the 8th principle to our covenant.
So I think, Reverend Jamie, you had some reflections that you wanted to offer.
I do, and I am just taking Al's talk in again and receiving it with such grace. And Al, I want to thank you for the vulnerability of your story and how your vulnerability reached into my own heart as you shared your story of transformation and your relationship to your own privilege, the tailwinds that you described, and learning to acknowledge and see those tailwinds, and then to connect with the suffering of others. I think your journey is a story that we can all find ourselves within in many ways. Those of us with privilege, as we're trying to locate our own and understand our own privilege, and opened and deepened towards new ways of being. That vulnerability and that willingness to be open to transformation, I think, is something that Unitarian Universalists step into. And thank you for bringing that and bringing that spirit of learning, openness, and vulnerability to us today. The second thing that really hits me as I listen to the story again is how clearly you name that just because the 7 principles we have now seem to work for some people, they don't work for everyone. And that's a powerful insight to be grounded in and open to and open towards. And thank you for saying it so clearly and naming it with such power inside your own story. Al, I understand why you are going viral. It makes total sense to me. You are doing ministry in the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Beverly, what did you have thoughts to add, or?
Well, no, I'm hoping that you are going to share some more thoughts, some more about sort of where you're positioned in all of this. I think in some ways Al has spoken, like, it's almost like, drop the mic.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't need to say anything.
How do you
Al's
follow up with that? But I guess I'll say this. People have been asking me, and this has to do with the role. I think if you've heard me, if you've listened to me over the short time I've been here, personally where I am in relationship to the 8th principle. And the question that people have been coming to me with is, well, what does this mean for our community? And I think this is an important question about what imagination do we need to go forward
as we embrace this work individually and collectively. And what does this mean for changes that might be on the horizon for First Unitarian Church of Hamilton? I think there is a great adventure of connection and relationship ahead of us. As we draw this work close and we start looking at our covenants and how are we covenanting with each other? How are we returning to covenant with each other? How are our programs and our relationships inside of our programs functioning in a way that are really truly inclusive in considering how supremacy culture might be woven through in shaping our systems? So I see possibilities of transformation for us individually, as Al describes, and also collectively for our communities to truly live into and inhabit new ways of being that really do embody love, really do say yes to love. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about the things that have yet to arrive into our community. And Beverly, I'm so thank you for opening the space today for us to have a conversation like this. It feels very special.
And you're special. We are so blessed to have you with us, and I'm really looking forward to how you're going to help us step into the future of Unitarian Universalism as you just described it. That seems like a really exciting space for us to envision for ourselves and to step into. So I'm thankful for that.
It is, and it is our work to do together. This is the work of community and relationship. And it is an adventure of love. So it's good things, all good things.
Thank you. And now, our last guest on the show today is Dr. Madeline Verkhosek. She's been around here for a little while, not as long as some of us. Some of us who've been here 2 decades and a little bit. Madeline has been a member of the church for about 5 years, and she lives here in Hamilton with her husband, Tim, and their children, Nicola, Thomas, and Miles. She has a lifelong passion for equity and social justice, which flows into her work as a physician in Hamilton and as an associate professor of medicine at McMaster University. So Madeline, happy to have you here on the show. And the first question I would like to ask you, you talked in your bio about your passion for equity and social justice, and then you talked about your work and being a mom. So I'm wondering for you how the whole idea and the work and the ministry of dismantling racism and other oppressions, how does that figure into your view of your work, your view of the world, and your view of being, your experience of being a mom?
Yeah, you know what? And thank you so much, Beverly. It's delightful to join in with such passionate advocates and allies. And I like the word accomplices alongside the work that the eighth Principle Working Group is doing today. I'll anchor what I'm going to say on a quotation from a Martin Luther King Jr. Portion of a speech from 1967, where he says, "I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the good Samaritans on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. So when I read that, I think, it's incredible that that's approaching 50 years ago, that quotation came through. And in some ways it's, brings chills to see how applicable it is now. And then you think, wow, why is that still so applicable now? And so for me, I think that intersectionality that gets brought out there, it's the racism, it's together with the extreme materialism and the economic inequalities. And I do see that every day in my work as a physician. I work with folks from all walks of life, but in my specialty, looking after patients and working with them and their families who have sickle cell disease and other inherited blood disorders. Most of my patients would identify as Black or from the African diaspora or are from other racialized or immigrant communities. And I do see this day to day. Not only are they facing an uphill battle with their medical issues, but over time, I came to realize the injustices they were experiencing and the discrimination they were experiencing in other settings, again, in policing, in education, or other institutions. And so when I look at the 8th principle, as a physician, as a mom, I think about, what are the injustices in our society? What are the things that I am not aware of because of the privileged space that I have in our society? I think it really starts, it centers racism, but it acknowledges that there are all these other interwoven oppressions. And I really see in our community right now the economic inequalities and the issues that we see with encampments, both here in Hamilton and beyond. And you think, what's underlying this? You come back to that MLK quote and you say, what's underlying all of this? One thing to give somebody some money when they're asking for money on the street. It's one thing to try to address a situation where somebody has experienced racism and help them navigate that. But how do we fight those oppressions upstream together and not place the workload on the individuals who are experiencing the oppressions? How do we use our privilege to align forces?
That's fabulous. We're going to have to extend this conversation sometime. It's 20 after 11 almost. So, that'll be a sidebar at some point. But Madeline, we had talked about a while ago, we had talked about a quote from James Baldwin that struck you to be very, very profound. So I was wondering if you could share that for us as we're starting to wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely, I can. And it's a little bit of a long quote, so it can probably lead into our wrap up. But I think what I encounter, even as I'm working in these university and hospital spaces, is people who are really good human beings, who just maybe want to do good, but maybe don't understand the challenges because they're living in this space that is so insulated from the oppressions. And so, they say, what are we talking about? Oppression? Nobody's oppressed. This is a free country. But if you speak with Black and Indigenous people in Canada, many of them will offer a very different perspective. And so I was reading this book, No Name in the Street by James Baldwin. It was published in 1972. And at that time, it was, there was the anti-Vietnam sentiment was still ongoing. You had flower children and people primarily white who were starting to protest it. So just to situate the quote, what he's doing in this reading from the book, he's juxtaposing what he notices in Black and racialized students at Watts, which is an inner city high school, with the white students and young adults from economically advantaged communities. So he's kind of juxtaposing. So he says, and yet, I have been to Watts to give high school lectures, for example, and these despised, maligned, and menaced children have an alertness, an eagerness, and a depth which I certainly did not find or failed to elicit from students at many splendid universities. The future leaders of this country, in principle anyway, do not impress me as being the intellectual equals of the most despised among us. I'm not being vindictive when I say that, nor am I being sentimental or chauvinistic. And indeed, the reason that this would be so is a very simple one. It is only very lately that white students in the main have had any reason to question the structure into which they were born. It is the very lateness of the hour and their bewildered resentment, their sense of having been betrayed, which is responsible for their romantic excesses. And a young white revolutionary remains in general far more romantic than a Black one. For it is a very different matter and results in a very different intelligence to grow up under the necessity of questioning everything from the question of one's identity to the literal, brutal question of how to save one's life in order to live it. White children in the main, and whether they are rich or poor, grow up with a grasp of reality so feeble that they can very accurately be described as deluded about themselves and the world that they live in. White people have managed to get through entire lifelines in this euphoric state, but Black people have not been so lucky. A Black man who sees the world the way John Wayne, for example, sees it, would not be an eccentric patriot, but a raving maniac. And I draw parallels here with our Canadian, present day author Desmond Cole in his book, The Skin We're In, and he refers to white supremacy creating this parallel universe. White people are walking around in a parallel universe where they can't even imagine in some ways. So, where this places us, number one, I read this quote and I think as a parent, my white children, who I think are listening on to the service today, they are in a parallel universe. So how do we break that open? How do we make sure that they understand the inequalities that exist in our system? And we as a church community, a diverse church community, but each one of us coming from our different perspectives, how do we make sure that we are really tuned in and paying close attention to our Black, Indigenous, and other racialized community members, both within and outside the church, and being accomplices with them to bring about change.
Thank you, Madeline. Oh, I'm getting some word from the control booth right now that we've got to wrap up very soon. So I'm going to run forward and thank Madeline for being our guest today. Thank you for Al in his YouTube viral state for being present with us. And to our interim minister, Reverend Jamie Boyce, I thank her for being my co-host today and also one of the guests on the show. I'm so happy that Rachel is still here because I'm going to thank her for doing a recording of one of my favorite hymns. I think when she saw that I wanted it, she must have groaned because I asked her for it all the time, and she sings it and plays it in a way that few other human beings I know, few other musicians can. So we'll wrap up the show today with Rachel's recording of Fire of Commitment.
Woohoo! Thank you, Beverly.
Well, thank you.
Number 1028, The Fire of Commitment. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind
I have word from our command center that we are running a bit late today, so that's okay. We will have chat groups. They might be a bit shorter, but that's okay. This was a beautiful service, beautiful, beautiful service today. Beloved, go into the world certain that the love that you discover here will nourish and sustain you all the days ahead. Through seasons of joy, grief, and deep personal and collective transformation, we are here for each other. Let the fire of commitment blaze the way. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
I told you what I really need. Would your heart and soul say yes? If I told you what I really need, would your heart and soul say yes? There is more that I require of thee. Would your spirit still say yes? Yes.